and Renee will get with you when you need to say something or interrupt. Cameras on would be great. If you guys can figure it out, it's kind of nice to look at you guys since we can't be in person. Also,
Oh, hey, Jim.
Just unmute him.
I can't.
who muted me?
Me.
Whoever-
I muted
Right.
everybody, and then
Right.
I can't unmute you. So
No, fair. So yeah, so I just got a new camera. Bruce told me that I was looking bad with it coming up, so I put it up a little higher. So it's going to take me a while to get used to looking at the camera, so sorry about that. Everybody used the link that I sent out, right? Because I got somebody saying that it's showing invalid. That's
Yeah, I came in right from the Facebook link, Jim. It worked great.
okay. That's the one I used. You know what? Hey, Dave, if you don't, while I'm going through this housekeeping stuff, you got Tony's number, Lee?
Yeah, I'll message him.
Yeah, maybe message him and help him. He's having a little bit of trouble getting on here. Thanks. All right, so let's get going here because, like I said, I want to keep this at about an hour. I am going to go, you know what, Renee, too, watching the video on YouTube with all the thumbnails, what do you think it would be better if you went to speaker instead of all the thumbnails having whoever's talking on?
oh yes, I can do that.
Maybe just for the, I think it's easier to watch for the
Right.
video.
Yep. Hang on a
Okay,
second.
good. All right, so we'll get to it. Listen, I'm gonna go through, well, first couple housekeeping things here. One, right now we're at 25. 25's we're doing a little better. During election night, we were up to like 40 some people. And the last 3 days, I've noticed Facebook is kind of limiting my reach. So I'm a little worried that they might be limiting the reach into your feeds from even the group, because I am running the group. So if you do me a favor throughout the week, just make a point to check in on the group. Don't expect it to show up in your feed. I don't think Facebook's happy with me right now with the stuff I'm posting on my own page. So I don't think it's getting out like it should. So if you could just do me a favor, check in once or twice a week, whatever, and see what's been posted. My guess is you're going to see things that never popped in your feed. I think that's it. Is there anything else? I mean, we've been doing good on posts. There haven't been any political posts, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I don't actually, Renee, you got anything? Think of anything?
Not that I can think of. No,
All right.
I think we're good.
All right. Well, then let's get down to it. Last week was pretty easy. It's just an overview, and we went into the preamble, which doesn't really mean a whole lot. But now we're going to get into it. This is Article 1. And Article 1 is a pain in the ass, if we're being honest. I'm going to go through as much of it as I can. I don't think we're going to get through all 10 sections because each section has multiple clauses. I don't think we're going to get through it all. I think we're going to have to split it up into 2 weeks, but we'll go as far as we can. And then right at 9, I'm just going to end it and we'll pick it back up in the next week. Sound good? All right. As always, interrupt. Hopefully you guys read up on it a little bit. This is a discussion, so it helps if you guys discuss instead of just listening to me. Chime in with whatever you want. Nobody's going to make fun of you here, right? I know that most of us here don't know anything about the Constitution. So, and with that, I guess we'll start. Does anybody have anything before I get going? Looking like anything? All right. All right, let me get into full screen here. There we go. All right, so I'll be referring down to my notes. Sorry if I'm not looking at you the whole time. So when the Constitution was created, there were 2 powers that created our government, right? Those 2 powers were the people and the states. We're the ones that created it. So what the Constitution basically is a contract between the states and the government and the people. It outlines what we're willing to let the government do. We tell the government how to do it. And it obviously restricts the government so that they cannot do certain things to us. We tell them how they're going to run the government. And as we go through this, you're going to think of a whole lot of things. You're going to be like, wait a minute, but the government does this. which is contrary to what the Constitution says, and that's where the discussion needs to happen. So feel free to chime in. We'll get into Article 1, Section 1, if everybody's there with their constitutions first. I'm going to read each section and then just kind of go through what it means and interrupt. Renee, I'll be reading, probably not looking at the screen a whole lot, so just interrupt me if you need to interrupt me. Anybody has anything to say. All right. So Article 1, Section 1. First off, Article 1 outlines the legislative branch of the government, right? And I think there's something to be said for the fact that they started with the legislative. I think they felt the legislative was probably the most important branch of all of them. They give the legislative, I think, a little more power than the rest, right? The president, he's the commander in chief, but he can't declare war. It takes the legislative, it takes Congress to declare war, those kind of things. The very first section here is all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Where am I at here? So it doesn't say some of the legislative power, right? It says all. That means that the Supreme Court can't legislate, as they do sometimes throughout history from the bench. That means the president can't legislate through executive orders, which all of them do, right? That means that different sections, different parts of the government, EPA, making the regulations. They can't make regulations to carry any kind of penalty, because then it becomes a law. Everything has to go through Congress, every single law. All is probably the biggest word in this whole section. I just went through just about everything, all my notes there without even looking at them. Look at me.
I'd like to add, Jim, if I could,
Yep.
just for a moment,
No,
that word legislative or legislative powers from the 1755 dictionary, it says the definition of legislative is giving laws or law giving. Legislature, the power that makes laws. So the word legislature really is about making law and giving law, establishing law. It's worth having their definition in mind when we talk about this, I think.
sure.
That's from the 1755.
I didn't even pull up any definitions. I trusted you for that. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's a big section. It gives Congress the power to make every law in this country, right? Supreme Court can give their opinions on the laws, but they can't change the laws. They can give their opinions on the constitutionality of a law, but they can't change the laws. The president can't change laws. Both the president and the Supreme Court can suggest laws, right? They can go to the Congress and they can suggest that they take this up, but Congress is in no, there's nothing telling Congress they have to do that. It's up to Congress completely. Does anybody have anything else, any questions on section 1?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I noticed that powers is capitalized. Is that for a reason?
Legislative powers. I don't know. The one I'm looking at, it's not, probably not.
Okay.
No, they're writing-
In a lot of the old documents, they tended, back in the day, they tended to capitalize a lot of significant words that they thought were important, often nouns, but they did it for emphasis. And if you have a copy of the Constitution that is written the same way they wrote it originally, it'll have those words capitalized. So in section 2, you'll see House of Representatives is capitalized, members is capitalized. They do that to add emphasis. But
Okay.
it is worth noting that when you see a word that's capitalized, they thought that was significant.
Right.
So
All
good
right, great.
catch.
Cool.
I have a question.
Yep.
So if it's the job of Senate, House of Representatives and the Senate to be doing the passing the laws, being the legislature and all that, then how is it that SCOTUS gets involved with certain things like Roe v. Wade, which, is like laws and other things like that? I mean, wouldn't that make those decisions illegal and illegitimate?
right? Gay marriage, that's another one.
Yeah,
From a few years ago. Absolutely, it would. And I don't know why we let them get away with this, right? I don't think you can trust government to check government. I think that's up to us, but we are so apathetic in this country now. People don't know what the Constitution says. I guarantee there's some people out there that have no idea what section or that Article 1 was. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely, Chris, you're absolutely right.
And that gets back to, like we talked about last week, we talked about once a law is written, circumstances come up where it's applied, and then somebody has an argument about the application of the law, then it makes it to the Supreme Court where they have to interpret the intention of the law and the specific application of it in that instance. And in effect, they might be redefining the law. And at that point, it would be up to the legislature or us to say, well, that's not really what was meant by that law. We need to change it, but we don't. What happens is they interpret the law, they apply it, and then it sticks.
And I think people are confused on what the Supreme Court's actual job is. I think most people out there think the Supreme Court has the right to change laws that they either deem unjust or deem unconstitutional, but that's not the way it works. You take something to the Supreme Court says, yeah, we think this is unconstitutional, and it's supposed to go back to the legislature now for them to change it. Or like Dave said, for us to change it, but it's not for them to change it. They're only there to make opinions on a law. It's up to the legislatures then at that point to go ahead and change things. So yeah, Roe v. Wade, the gay marriage issues. I mean, I could probably make a list, right? I could probably make a list for you for next week, past 25 years when they have legislated from the bench. And the more activists the court, the more legislation they're going to do. And we let them get away with it.
I would think like if you're an opponent of an issue going in front of SCOTUS, I mean, all you have to do is just reference Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution for everything and
let me
say
ask you
SCOTUS
this, though.
can't make the decision on this.
Well, let me ask you this though. So who's the Supreme? Well, I mean, there it is in the name. Who's the Supreme Court, right? Where do you go from there? Who do you complain to?
Yeah, I mean, good question.
You know, I'm asking the question. It's not even rhetorical.
I mean,
Right.
that comes back to writing a new law to fix what's wrong with the Congress and the Senate.
I think
So
what
you're going to
happens
get
with
government.
that,
You're
though,
going to get government to control themselves.
well, I think what happens is if you go to change the law and like, okay, we're going to go back to the House of Representatives, and they'll be changing laws back and forth, left and right between the House and the Senate based off of party lines. Like, oh, now we have the, like, for example.
Well, but if it works the way it's supposed to work,
let's go back and.
if it works the
redo
way it's supposed to work, though, the Supreme Court should give their opinion on it and give you guidance as to how to make that law constitutional.
an
right?
interpretation.
It's not like they
right.
can say, it's not like they're going to say, well, we believe A, and then it gets down there and the House is saying, hey, we believe B. Well, it doesn't matter what you believe. The Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution to mean A. And that's where I think the law needs to get changed in that direction. But
So with the ACA, the healthcare law that that the Supreme Court isn't making a ruling on. So what you're saying is that'll go back down to the Congress to fine tune it, to fix
Well,
it?
Yes, it
to
should.
a point, is that where it belongs? I'll tell you what, I'll wait. Why don't you guys read through the Constitution and you find the word healthcare in the Constitution?
It isn't, yeah.
It's not. So if you want to get into it, no, it should not go back down to Congress. Where it should go is back to the states, and the states can determine what their healthcare is, right? And that's the way it's always supposed to work. If Ohio's healthcare, all of a sudden, now I don't like it, but Kentucky's like, hey, look, here's ours. And I'm like, well, that sounds good. Then I move to Kentucky. When enough people move out of Ohio, Ohio's going to say, shit, our healthcare is all screwed up. We better change it. And then they're going to get people to move back in. That's how these United States are supposed to work. But Congress really, I mean, if you want to get constitutional, Congress doesn't have any right to be doing anything with healthcare.
That ties in really well though with, when you went back earlier saying that the Constitution is a contract between the federal government and the states. If it's not in the Constitution, then it should be a state decision.
Right.
Not should be. We have an amendment that says it.
Yeah.
The 10th Amendment
Right.
says it is. It's sent back to the states.
And what's happening with the justices is there's different ways to read the contract, right? So you have these like Sotomayor, this living, breathing document that it changes with the culture. That's kind of how those people read the contract. And then you get people that are originalists, like the new Amy Coney Barrett and Clarence Thomas, that they say this is what it meant when it was written, and that's how it's going to stay. And then you get the textualists like Gorsuch, who's, this is how it reads, so that's what it means. And they don't necessarily go into the context of what the words meant at the time.
Which is why there's always such a fight over Supreme Court justices, right? The last thing the Democratic Party wants is a Supreme Court full of originalists. That's the last thing they want. They believe, a lot of them believe that it's a living, breathing document and supposed to change with the times, right? So they want people in there who are going to rule that way. And that is why, well, that's half the reason why there was such a fight for Kavanaugh and for Amy Coney Barrett, because they know that they're originalists. Part of the reason. Can't talk politics. All right, I'm going to move on to section 2 here real quick. So section 2, clause 1, the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. I'll go ahead and read 2 at the same time. Section 2 is no person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state in which he shall be chosen. Now, another thing, don't get all offended, right? A lot of what I say, even when I'm talking, is going to be he. I'm not a sexist. I get it. I get that Kamala now has been possibly elected vice president, but everything written in the Constitution is he, right? So that's kind of how I'm going to refer to things as I'm talking. Obviously, we have a lot of female congresswomen, but I'm just going to use the general term. It's not perfect. I know that. I mean, Declaration of Independence, when we get into it, and even parts of the Constitution, where they're talking about everybody's created equal. It's kind of weird that they wrote that when everybody wasn't created equal, right? At that time. I mean, we owned slaves, for God's sake. How are they equal? And that's a whole nother discussion, but while it's imperfect as he, that's just how I'm going to refer to it as we're talking. So the first clause, obviously setting up the House. The House of Representatives was set up to represent the people, okay? The Senate was set up to represent the states. That's why we have the 2 different houses. The last phrase in this thing is absolutely mind-boggling, which is the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. So basically what that means is that anybody who legally could vote for their state legislatures can vote for the federal legislature. If you can't vote for the state, you can't vote for the federal. In a nutshell, that's what it means. Obviously, clause 2, that's pretty easy, right? All it is setting up that you got to be 25 years old. You got to be a citizen of the country of the United States for 7 years, and you have to live in the state that you're going to be elected in. Pretty easy. So the way, and I think we get into this later, but the House of Representatives, because there's so many of them, we have elections for them. Oh, nope, never mind. We'll get into that later. I don't even want to get into that right now. Questions, comments? Anybody write anything down they want to say?
Yeah, I wrote something in the chat, Jim. I think
Yeah. Oh,
that
man,
all
I'm not watching the
significant
chat, sorry.
all significant progress in this country has been made when oppressed groups focused on the fact that the Constitution said they were created equally. I think that line, although it wasn't applied appropriately at that time, has been the line that's given more freedom to anybody in the world. You know,
Oh,
living the
for
right-
sure, for
So
sure.
It's that line, living up to the Constitution.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, especially, obviously, the biggest one is going to be slavery as we go through this thing, right? And we're going to talk about that here shortly, where slaves were only counted as 3/5 of a person for census purposes when they were giving you representation, and that was a big deal. Obviously, the South wanted them counted full, but I mean, yeah, it's a horrible thing. We have a bad past, right? I mean, nobody's going to deny that. Slavery's horrible. Slavery's horrible, but we recognized it, we fixed it. And I mean, we are truly one of the freest countries now in the world. We're probably the freest country. But you're right. I mean, a lot of what has come up, has made us like that are the problems that we've had. Anybody else? Section clauses 1 and 2 on section 2.
I just think that was a very astute observation about equality. And I think he's exactly right. That was a great observation.
Yeah, right on, for sure. Anybody else? Come on now. Don't make me do all the talking. All right.
Quiet.
Huh?
The chat is pretty quiet, so.
Yeah, well, no, we're getting there. We're getting a little more. I mean, I think as people start understanding things, it's going to be, I talked to somebody today, Stephanie Brooks, and she said, man, as she's reading this thing, it's just so over her head. And I get it. When you read this thing the first time, you're like, what the fuck? Oh, sorry if your kids are here. Hey, I got to give you a dog collar. Maybe you could just hit the button from your house. This will shock me in the neck when they start swearing. But yeah, I know it's until it's explained to you and until you start understanding it, it's a lot, but you're only going to learn by getting in there. Right. Okay. So, the third clause is the first one that gets a little confusing now. I'm going to read it all as it was written. And then we're going to talk about the parts that don't apply anymore. That don't apply because of the amendments. So section 3 is a little long.
We have one more question on
Oh yeah,
the,
get in.
on the second clause. So Dan and Joanna had asked, why does the second clause say that they shall not be an inhabitant of the state of which he is chosen? Am I reading this wrong?
I did the same thing. It's because it starts with no person shall be a representative who is
Well,
not an inhabitant of the
Right,
state.
right. The key word there that she just said is not. So if you read the very first sentence, it's no person shall be a representative who shall not have attained the age of 25 years, been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state in which they're chosen. It's confusing. And when I read it, it's confusing. But if you break it down, what they're saying is that you will not be elected if you are not an inhabitant. So, and it's everybody, I guarantee that all 32 people in here thought the same thing, just nobody wanted to say anything.
Well,
Right.
it's the double negative. It's
It-
the no person
Hey,
shall not.
hey, they didn't have good public schools like we do back then.
So
right?
it's written in attorney speak.
Yeah, they weren't as good as educated as us. So, but yeah, that's all that means. Yeah, fair. All right. God damn. Clause 3. This is so horrible. All right. So what it says is representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers. Now, this section was actually taken out and amended by, I don't know if I have,
14,
was it
14th
14?
Amendment.
Was it 14?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, yeah, because I did not write down the amendment that amended it. Now, this section here that I'm going to say was amended by the 14th Amendment and is no longer in force. So according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. And that's one of those things we were talking about where they were only considering slaves as 3/5 of a person, right? You didn't get a full person for representation. They didn't count. I mean, you needed 2 slaves to even get one. So obviously you can see the problems with that. It wasn't a perfect document when it was written. I mean, it was pretty close, but it wasn't perfect. And we fix these things. Continuing on, and this is in force, the actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States and within every subsequent term of 10 years in such manner as shall by law direct. The number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000, but each state shall have at least 1 representative. And then this is not in force anymore. And until such enumeration shall be made, the state of New Hampshire shall be entitled to choose 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations 1, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 4, Pennsylvania 8, Delaware 1, Maryland 6, Virginia 10, North Carolina 5, South Carolina 5, and Georgia 3. Now, none of that means anything. Nobody cares about anything I just read. But one of my things with this is that when we're done with this, I want you to have read every single word of the Constitution. All right. So that's the only reason I went through it. So we get into 3.
If I could make a comment on 2, Jim.
Yeah. On where are we? Back to 2?
Yeah, the 3/5 compromise.
Oh, we're still in 3.
Okay. Yeah, if I can make a comment on the 3/5
Section 2, clause 3.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
So I think it's important for people to understand kind of what was happening there, right? So although the 3/5 compromise happened, we look back at it in history and go, yeah, it was terrible. It was wrong. We shouldn't have done it. I think sometimes we lose sight of what was going on historically. You know, at that time, we were trying to get the country together. The northern states and the southern states just couldn't agree on anything. And it was one of those things that it's a compromise. I can't remember what the other part of the compromise was.
Well, we're going to get into that. The Great Compromise.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a compromise. We give you this so you have some power, but it's the final thing that's going to allow us to get this Constitution passed and get all these other rights.
Right.
done.
All right. So the Great Compromise that he is talking about. So the problem was that the states, and still, when we talk about like the Electoral College, this is still an argument that goes on, but the bigger states were going to have more representation than the smaller states, right? The big states wanted all their slaves to be counted. They were going to have more representation because it was based on population. So what the compromise was they settled on, we will give you 3/5 for all the slaves. They will count as 3/5 of a person. The compromise came when they then set the Senate at 2 seats per state. Every state got 2 regardless of population. Now, remember the House is for the people and the Senate is for the states. So this way, by them having equal representation in the Senate, the states were all protected a little bit, right? All the people were represented, and that was based on population. So if you had a bigger state, you had some more representatives there in the House.
So David Sands had thrown in that breakdown of representatives was a population, was a combined 1,860,000 based on the 1 to
Correct.
30,000.
Correct. And we're going to talk about that because right now, if we had kept up, there was a law passed in 1929 that set the House at 435 members. There's still talk. I mean, the Constitution says 1 for every 30,000 people, right? Actually, I want to refer back. Let me get my book here because I've got something I want to talk about with that.
You said 435?
Huh?
435?
I believe that's what it's at, right?
Yeah, we'd have 10,000 people in Congress if we kept that 30,000
Correct.
ratio.
Correct. We would have 10,000 people. Now, so it seems like a lot, right? and I understand why they did it, why they capped it at 435, but if we kept it at one, because right now we're, I think, well, what, if I remember the math, it's like one per every 700,000 people, you got one representative in the House of Representatives for one out of every 700,000. So I'm referring to a book called Saving the Constitution, and he brings up some good points. Here. Uh-oh, what happened here? You guys still see me? I just got a pop-up.
No, you're good.
Look and sound good. You're good.
Oh, back to meeting. Yeah, I got a pop-up for Adobe. Want me to update. You know what? I thought it was this one. So, all right, give me a second here. Somebody say something. Let me find what I was, what I'm after. Where are we at? Section 3, paragraph 2.
While you're looking for that, so quick question. So say if like Puerto Rico or DC ever does become a state, would they keep the number of representatives at that 435 and some states lose representation, or do they up the number?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question, right? Because we've not had anybody added in a long time. So
1960, right?
yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, man, I don't know. And that's a great question.
If that law was passed in 1929, I know Hawaii
Right.
and Alaska were added. So if it stayed the same, I imagine that would be the case. But the Senate would go up per each per statehood. That's my hypothesis.
Well, I don't know where, what I was looking for, where that went. But basically, so what they were saying, Dave, when we're talking about this, about the 10,000 being too many, right? Part of the problem is you can't have 10,000 people in Washington. But with the world the way it is, look at us here, right? Look at us. We've got 32 people on here right now talking. So there's no reason why. And I'm not advocating this. I'm just telling you what the what some of the thinking is. There's no reason why you can't still have one for every 30,000 people. So we have 10,000 reps, right? But those reps are now got a very small. I mean, you're talking about they're dealing with maybe just something the size of North Ridgeville. So they're intimately familiar with what your problems are here. You could do it online. Everybody stays home, right? It's so easy now to talk. Everybody stays home, and the representation is that much greater. Remember, the House is for the people. Because right now I've got one, you know, it's one rep, I think, for every 750,000 people, I think, if my math is right on that. So, yeah.
Hey, Jim, if you think that the House of Representatives can't get anything done now, you put
Well,
10,000 people on
True.
it.
I mean, and then that's, you know, that's the other part. Now you got to vote somehow, right? I mean, so, hey, I'm not saying I advocate it. I'm just saying that's what, you know, some of the people out there who are trying to stay true to the Constitution, they're basically saying, look, a law doesn't supersede the Constitution.
Hey, if
So-
American Idol can do it, we can, right?
Yeah, right. Texas can get them all voted there in 2 days.
Jim, what document is the changes to the population requirements for representation? And I know we'll probably get into that as these classes go on, but at what point in time were those added and amended?
As far as what? What do you mean?
1 to 30,000 to now having 1 to 750,000. When,
Well, 1929 is when they passed the law capping it at 435. So
Okay.
since it was capped at 435 then, and as the population rises, it's still capped at 435. So those
And that-
numbers just keep going up.
and that's why everybody freaks out about redistricting.
Well, yeah, and then you get, right, gerrymandering and,
Okay.
yep, I mean, exactly.
Would we have to then do another amendment if we wanted to up that from 435?
Well, I don't know, because they never did an amendment in the first place. It's
Oh,
still,
it's
the
not an
Constitution still says one for every 30,000
That's what I
people, right? It's a law, but they never
It's a
amended the
law.
Constitution for it. So I guess that's, you know, that's where people go back and forth.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Having 10,000 congressmen, are you kidding me?
That's
Oh my
nuts.
gosh.
Lord, could you even imagine?
In New York City,
And,
how many?
and I guess the other thing you'd have to look at is right now, how much are we paying them? Right? So we're paying 435 of them, what, $175,000 a year? Now we're going to pay 10,000 of them, $175,000 a year?
On the easy side of that, if they're only representing 30,000 people, then they should only get paid like $30,000.
Well, yeah, but you got to remember when that was written too, there was no full-time Congress, right? These were farmers that would meet up a couple times a year and they'd vote on what they have to vote on.
They had to meet
And
once
when
a
their
year.
time was done, they went back to being farmers. There weren't professional Congress people. There weren't professional politicians. They weren't getting healthcare forever. They weren't getting a pension forever.
And I pulled up a little article about this law from 1929, and essentially one of the big reasons for the push was that the big population centers were getting too much representation, and the rural population was getting not enough representation. So this is actually taking power away from some of those metro cities and putting it back down to the people.
Well, then my guess is it's probably the people in the metro cities that are complaining about it then. I don't know. I don't know who's I don't know who's complaining about it, but that would be my guess then. I mean, that makes sense. Thanks, Brandon.
It's worth mentioning too, that at the Constitutional Convention, there was a lot of discussion about representation, a great deal of arguing. And at the time, they thought it might kill the whole convention, that they couldn't agree on how the representation was going to be made fair. So this is something that was argued from the beginning.
Well, and that's where the great compromise came in.
Yep.
They were at a stalemate. They weren't going to be able to get this through until they came up with this compromise.
Right. Yep.
In order to get two for every state. So Delaware gets 2 representatives, Texas gets 2 representatives in the Senate, 2 senators. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and they were at a stalemate there for a little bit. All right. I know section 3 is confusing, especially when I'm reading it. It was like I was reading Chinese. I'm reading it and I thought I was reading Chinese. But now they get shorter, I promise. So we'll move on.
Chinese might be easier.
Yeah.
Chinese might be easier.
Yeah, it might be. Actually, that was section 3 is horrible, man. Clause 3. All right, so we're going to move on to section 2, clause 4, which says, when vacancies happen in the representation from any state, the executive authority thereof shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. Clause 5, the House of Representatives shall choose their speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment, which we are all very well aware of now. So what clause 4 is saying basically is that vacancies in the House are filled by the people, right? We get to vote. They're going to issue basically a special election on when vacancies happen. I don't know if this is the one covering the special elections, like in the cause of death or not. Either way, when there's a vacancy, no matter what that vacancy is for, the people get to vote, right? Because the House is our house. It is the people's house. So we get to vote on who's gonna fill that vacancy. Vacancies in the Senate are a little different. Well, they're supposed to be different. Vacancies in the Senate are supposed to be filled by the state because vacancies, or because the Senate represents the states, right? The House represents the people, but that's not quite the way it works anymore, but that's how it was supposed to work. And that's how it originally worked. We'll get into that. Questions, comments? Clause 4, clause 5. Obviously, clause 5 is pretty self-explanatory. The majority chooses the speaker. So whoever has a majority in the House, they get to choose their speaker. Everybody knows where the speaker lands in the succession of power. President, vice president, unable to complete their duties, the Speaker of the House would move in. And so right now it'd be President Pelosi.
Don't ever say that again.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, no politics. No politics.
Oh, and constitutionally, if they don't figure out who the president is come January, she takes over.
That would be right.
That's in the
Well,
Constitution, not political.
for the time being. It's not going to be a permanent thing. It's not like she's going to be in there and we just do away with both candidates.
Right, until it's
Um,
resolved.
But yeah, it could be. Clause 5, it obviously gives the House the sole power of impeachment. Sole power. Nobody else. If the House are supposed to be the watchdogs of government, right? They are supposed to watch their own. They're supposed to watch the other party. They're supposed to, anybody involved in government. And if they decide that there is some impeachable offense there, high crimes, misdemeanors, treason, then it is up to them to bring that person up on charges for the impeachment. Nobody else has a say in it. President doesn't get a say in it. Supreme Court doesn't get a say in it. Completely up to the House. Anything? Questions? Comments? Who's not talking? I'm just gonna start
Okay,
picking people.
I'll say that I was reading that other clause that you were talking about vacancies and the way they've got it worded in their archaic fashion. It basically says that the executive authority of the state, that representative has died or whatever, they're going to make the arrangements for an election in the state of Virginia or Ohio, whatever.
Correct. Correct. But they're not picking. They're not picking. They're gonna set up the election.
They need to set up an election. It doesn't say
Basically,
post
right.
vacancies or anything. It just says they have.
Well, and it happens. It happens all the time, right? It happened in Georgia. It happens anytime somebody retires, all of a sudden they decide scandal, whatever, they have to step down, they die. Then there's a special election.
Right.
Um,
And the state handles that, whatever state that's in.
Correct. Not the federal government.
Correct.
Anything else? Does anybody have questions?
What
Does
does
anybody
that
not understand anything?
Arizona, I think, when McCain died, they just kind of appointed her, if I remember right.
What's that?
McSally in Arizona,
That was the Senate.
when McCain died, they just appointed her into the Senate.
Yeah, because the Senate gets to do that. The House of Representatives, they have to have a special election.
Correct. The Senate is for the states, the House is for the people. So the House, when there's a vacancy, we vote. The Senate, they get appointed, which is why McSally got in there. Nope.
Wayne,
we
no politics.
What's that?
There was a couple comments. Tara was giving you giving you a doing great Larkin, and then Wayne threw in the dead people can vote. Why can't they hold a seat? So
Wayne, Wayne, we're not doing this until the after party.
again, that levity kind of helps with this dryness.
No, fair. All right, so hold on here. My screen got all screwed up.
Okay, I have a question.
Here we go.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yep. There we
Hi.
go.
Hi, it's Jody. So when we say that the 3/5 of, the slaveries, they had votes, does anybody want to mention the fact that women were not allowed to vote?
Well, no. The 3/5 was not voting. The 3/5
Okay.
were as they appointed members for the House.
Okay,
They counted for population so that they could get representatives in there.
did they
And,
count women?
yeah, boy, that's a good question. Does anybody know?
Asian women, 100%.
They did
They
do
did.
women?
Yeah, women counted for population,
Okay,
and then,
They couldn't vote.
yeah, they just couldn't vote.
They
okay,
just- Okay,
good.
but but colored people could vote, right?
They could not at that point,
Not at that point.
not at that
But
point.
okay. Thank you for clarifying.
No
I was-
problem. And we'll get into that.
Yeah, that was
Um,
strictly to count the population and how much representation each state gets. So that allowed the southern states to get more representation. All voting at that time was strictly done by white men.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, at that time. And you were asking about when the blacks could vote, right?
I don't even think it was white men. I think you had to be a landowner, didn't you?
Landowners.
Be a landowner to vote, so.
Well,
Okay, and I have one more question. I'm sorry.
so just real quick, just to answer your first question there.
Okay,
That the 15th Amendment allowed the blacks to vote, and that
Right.
was ratified on February 3rd, 1870. So starting in February of 1870,
mhm.
they were allowed to vote at that point.
And do you know when women were allowed to vote?
Yeah, I'll give you the date.
1920.
Yeah, long time. Sorry, just asking.
Nope, it's fine. It was ratified on August 18th, 1920 for women.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, I'm sorry, one more question. I should have asked.
No, man, we're good.
When you say that legal, what did they mean by legal? That you could legally be counted and legally vote? What did they mean by that?
What do you mean?
What did they mean by that? Like, did you have to be a landowner? Did you have to be, how is it back then that you had to legally vote? Even now, they're not making it so that you have to legally vote, that you don't have to have an ID, you don't have to be, you don't have to be a legal immigrant. They're trying to change everything. So I'm wondering back then, what was the definition of legal?
I think what she's asking is what
No,
what made it legal?
right.
Like, what constituted as legal?
Hey, Dave,
Right.
what do you think on that, Dave? On your definitions giving us anything? You guys want to talk amongst yourselves? Let me get my dictionary out from
Yeah, I'll
1825.
talk amongst us. I'm 50 years old and I didn't realize that black men could vote before women. I never knew that. And that is just shocking that it took me this many years.
Let me tell you what's funny about your comment. Here's what's funny about it. I have mine set right now for whoever's talking to show up on my screen. I don't have it on thumbnail. So as you're making that comment, all I see are the women in the group laughing. And as they laugh, they all pop up one at a time on my screen. So when you're saying that you had no idea, all the women are like, yeah, motherfucker, we knew.
We knew.
Yeah.
Hey,
Put it down there in the jar.
This is a great session. I'm coming away learning stuff. This is great.
And that's why when people of, when minorities scream about, injustice and how they've been suppressed, hello, I mean, hello.
Yeah, depending on how old you are. I mean, your grandma
Fuck
couldn't
you.
vote.
Sorry for any kids.
Oh.
Well, that's all right. I just dropped a mother F-bomb, so I realized it as soon as I said it.
We almost need to be on a time delay so I can mute people when.
Yeah. That's what we need.
Censor button.
Yeah, you need the button. That's exactly right.
And for some historical context as well, too, like part of it, not all of it, but part of the reason women weren't voting at that time too was voting at that time meant war. Like you were ready to go to war. So there was some hesitancy for women going up to that point to actually want to register to vote because it had different meanings back then. Voting didn't just mean you could go to the polls. There was other obligations that were met. I think they had bucket duty for fire duty because we didn't have fire trucks and all that. Those other things that were involved. So there was some hesitancy, and worldwide, most women didn't have any say in politics either. So,
hey, Brad, what was the minimum age to vote back then?
I'm looking and I don't see it yet. I'm imagining it was still 18, but I don't know that. So
I don't think it was. I feel like it was 21.
21.
Okay.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Because back then they didn't even live till 21, did they? No, that was a joke.
Well, geez, I hope they did. If they didn't, we got big problems. You know what? I don't know the answer to your question is what constitutes illegal. I will figure it out and I will know for next week, or I will know when we just, when we pop in live sometimes. Just keep an eye on the page. I'll figure it out for you. I will find somebody that knows.
That's a good question.
It is a good
We
question.
can definitely look into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those
And
are
I
good
think we should.
questions.
I think we should. That's what this is all about.
One of the questions I have then is if it was based on land ownership, I mean, people started doing things much younger, getting married younger and so forth than
Right.
nowadays. What if you were a landowner at 16 or 17? I don't know if that's was possible back then, but with people dying off and, parents taking over or kids taking over their parents' farms or whatever, I would think that there might not have been an age limit on it. I don't know. I can't wait to find out. That would be a good.
don't
Dr.
think it would have to
Google
be,
says
if
that
anything, a
it was up
combination.
to the states, and that
Yeah.
you had to, most states you had to be 21
Right.
and a landowner and a white male, but it was up to the states, according to Dr. Google.
Yeah, that's correct. That's what I'd read earlier in the week as well. Was each state set its own rules as to who could legally vote in that state.
Okay.
Well, there you go. Does
No.
that still hold true? Does that still hold true then?
As far
Today?
as,
Good point.
The
It does.
state having the say over who can vote.
the state
And-
sets their own election laws.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Wow.
Absolutely. But the state can't supersede the Constitution either.
Right.
So the state can't go now and say only 25-year-old people in our state can vote, right?
Okay.
Because the Constitution says that it's 18. The states can't go and say, you know what? Mexicans can't vote in our state. Well, they can because, again, race no bar. I
Oh, no,
mean,
you have to be a US citizen to vote.
Well, you do.
You just said
You know,
Mexican.
you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying illegal. I'm saying
Illegal
people of
immigrants.
Mexican descent. Jesus, how much you drank? I'm not gonna fight with you.
Ooh.
tonight.
I was, yeah, I am.
That brings up a lot of, okay. I can't wait
Yeah.
till we get to the voting part, where the amendments where we change.
Right. No, a lot of that'll be cleared up. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's kind of the problem with going in order. I mean, I'd like to jump around, but then it just gets so confusing, right? I go from here and then I go to I go to the amendments and I come back to here and it's just, I think it's going to be easier for us just to go through here. And if we need to refer to things, we can refer to things, but we'll hit that hard when we get to the amendments.
And if anyone has ideas about that, we can kind of talk about it in the live after part. So,
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
All right. So what do we got here? We got about 10 minutes. So let me move on to 3. Man, I really thought I was going to hit like 6. I thought I'd be at section 6 by the end of this. thing.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's why we're here. I have no problem at all. If we only did 1, I would be fine with that. As long as you're fine for sticking around for 8 months while we get through all this. So, but like Dave said, man, Dave's learning something today. So, I mean, this has been totally worth it for me. So let's get into section 3. Article 1, section 3, clause 1. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state. Now, this has been struck down. This has been amended, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. So if you remember, now we're into the Senate, and the Senate was representing the states, right? Now, this used to be that the legislature would choose their senators. But the 17th Amendment has really screwed up the Constitution. And when we get into the 17th Amendment, there's a lot wrong with it, but it's an amendment. We would have to change it. And once we get in Article 5, we'll see how to change these things. But now you've got the people choosing their senators, right? The House is supposed to be for the people. We vote for them. Senators for the states, and the states used to appoint their own senators, but now they're elected by the people. So the people are now got their hands in both the Senate and the House. Section 3. Yeah, I mean, those are the only notes I had written down on that. Discussion. Again, this was part of the Great Compromise, right? This is how we ended up with 2 senators, because the big states were going to run over the little states, and this is the way that the states could all be equal, all have representation. Brad, you got some?
I think that's interesting, the way you put that about, well, now the people have their say in both. Because it would be, I can't even fathom it, honestly. Like, at this point in my whole life, the Senate's been elected by us. So I can't even wrap my head around the idea that the House would go and, appoint the senators. I see some good and some bad in that.
Well,
Like,
the House doesn't. The House doesn't appoint them.
back then, didn't they? Based off of the way this
The states,
Your state legislature.
the state legislatures would.
Okay,
So-
I was thinking House of Representatives. So that clears that up.
No. So the Ohio State Legislature would pick their senators and send them. Right. Each state would pick their own.
Yeah, they,
That clears that up. Thank you.
was it 1912 or 1913 is when they made that amendment.
What's that? The 17th?
17. Yeah, it was 1913. It was ratified.
Yeah.
Yep. 1913.
And elected by popular vote.
That was like
Right.
right before they killed the alcohol.
Oh, something bitches.
There was a good
Dirty commies.
on that drink.
I can't. I'm not allowed to drink now. I promised your wife I would not drink during these things.
Okay.
Okay, so Jessica, Not sure if it makes a difference, but according to my notes, the 26th Amendment amending to age 18 was ratified on July 1st, 1971.
Wow, I didn't know it was that recent.
Neither did I. That's
But
crazy.
they could draft those kids to go to war in Vietnam, but they couldn't vote.
Yeah.
That's probably how.
Which I
that all-
wonder how much of that was I wonder how much of that amendment was brought forward because of that very reason. You know, it's weird though, man. I mean, when I was born, you had to be 21 years old to vote in this country.
Right, me
It
too.
was
Yeah.
weird to me. So.
Look at
Right
that.
on.
I'll learn something.
Yeah, I'm telling you, this is good. This is what we're here for. And I've only had one drop off, man. Only one person had to go. We're still at 30 and we got to get this up. You guys got to talk to your friends.
My book says that that 26th Amendment also amended the 14th Amendment in the process.
26 amended the 14th.
Yep, when it changed the age.
How are you gonna amend an amendment?
Because the first
That's
one
crazy
changed the
talk.
Constitution, and the second one then changed the Constitution again, thus modifying the first one. So I don't have-
Man, I'm going to have to,
what-
we'll
what
get
the
into that
14th
later. 14th Amendment is long. There's five clauses there
Says
too, 5
section 2.
paragraphs.
14th Amendment, Section 2 was modified by the 26th.
Since we're jumping, can we jump backwards?
Sure.
That's where it says age 21. The 14th is where it's age 21.
Oh, yes. And also excluding Indians, not taxed.
Right.
But yes, certainly,
But-
let's jump backwards.
Oh,
Back in clause 3, when we had all the confusion about the 3/5 of a person, the next sentence, is that the census? That we would be counted every 10 years? That's the
Yes.
census, right? The US Census?
Yeah,
Okay,
it is.
so it's early on and quick.
Yeah, well, that's how they were establishing the House of Representatives. You know, that's how they were establishing who, and we're gonna get into that. And I don't remember if it was there and I just skipped over it, where they were fighting over whether it was an actual count or it was an estimated count. Obviously, the more populous states wanted the actual count.
and Dean also had a side note, Dean Reinhardt, another side note about the 26th. There are still 7 states that have not ratified it.
Yeah, you know what, and there's some weird trivia like that. We've actually got amendments right now that are still pending, that have never been ratified from the 1800s. And we'll go over those. You guys can look them up. It's crazy. There's, I think, 7 of them that have never been ratified. They're still there on the books. They just haven't been ratified yet. And some, like I said, from the 1800s. I don't have them pulled up now, but
Yeah.
we'll go over all that. All right, so moving on here. I've got probably just enough time to hit clause 2.
Do it.
Jesus, maybe not. Well, what time is it?
It's 1 minute till.
All right, you know what? I'm gonna stop here. Renee, I'm gonna try to remember where we stopped. If you could also make a note where we stopped.
Yep.
I'm gonna
Okay.
stop because we got, the president's gonna be coming on. I know some people want to see that.
Oak Island's coming on.
And I'm trying to keep these things at, what'd you say?
Oak Island's starting tonight.
Yeah, right. So,
I predict we have 50 next week, Jim.
well, I hope. And you know what? Here's what I'm going to ask you guys is that you guys get a hold of your friends, whoever. You guys are also sharing this, because if my reach is being impacted by this, it's going to take you guys to get the word out too. So as we're coming into these meetings, you know, and you've invited your friends, even if you haven't invited your friends, just a quick update on it, whatever, just reach out to your friends, let them know this is what we got going on. Let them know. I mean, if you liked it, let them know you liked it, you know, let them know how you learned something from it. Everybody needs this, man. Everybody needs this. But yeah, I am worried about my reach. I'm worried about getting my message out there. So if you guys could do me a favor and help me out with this would be great. We'll make this something. So
Go to Parlor.
Anybody got anything before we end this?
No,
All right. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This was
great.
really awesome.
I'll be
Thanks,
going
Jim.
live here
Welcome
on
to
the,
Alicia.
Thanks,
I'll be,
Jim.
I'll be going live on the Constitution page now. I'll have my TV on, but feel free to stop over. We continue the discussion, whatever, and pour a drink. So I'll see you guys shortly.
Yeah, the
All
next
right.
session is informal and not always kid friendly. So you can bring your kids to this one is what we're trying to promote so that our kids can actually learn about it too. And Stephanie Brooks, thank you for bringing Alicia. That was great. And best channel to watch the president. Any suggestions?
Happy Veterans Day tomorrow.
Hannity. Yes, Hannity would be the best.
Yes, it is. He's going to be on Hannity. I don't think he's going to be on another channel. So if you want to watch it, you're going to have to go to Fox to see it.
Okay.
Um,
Yes, and happy
All right,
Veterans
I will-
Day to veterans.
Listen, everybody, just do me a favor, hit over onto the live here a little bit, just to give me my feedback, right? Whether what worked, what didn't work, what I need to change. So, all right.
Thank you.
Next week. All right.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep. All right. Bye-bye.